There's an old parable that has it that a man was walking along the edge of a mountain when he slipped. And soon he found himself dangling thousands of feet in the air, holding on to this small, scraggly tree that had sprouted from the rock. And he began yelling for someone to save him. And when that did not work, he began to yell to God to save him. And God answered, "Here I am, I'll save you. Do you believe I'll save you?" And the man shouted, "Yes, yes." And God answered, "Here I am." And the same thing, when that 60 seconds go by or so, nothing happens. Nothing happens. The man yells up again, "Hurry, God, save me." And God answers again, "Here I am, I'll save you. Do you believe me?" And the man says, "Yes," says it yes again. And nothing happens. The man starts to lose hope. He cries out again, "Hurry, God, save me." And God replies, "Well, let go of the limb. Let go of the limb." Today I suggest to you, we have more than just the elephant in the room behind me. Great text for this. The elephant in the room in every generation, I think Jesus says, is people. People can become obsessed with possessions, with things and money. It's been true long before Jesus, during the time of Jesus, all the way to this day and age. People can become obsessed with those things. Human nature is to cling to them, which Jesus says doesn't necessarily bring us life. But letting go is what Jesus points us to. And letting go, ultimately, is an amazing way to live. You know, there's a Japanese woman named Marie Kondo who has sort of made an impact in this world. She's written several books about how to declutter your life. She did a Netflix series earlier in this year that as soon as it was released, I know a lot of people began watching it, and I watched it as well. She's this lovely woman who comes into your home with an interpreter. She doesn't speak any English. She only speaks Japanese. But she's there to help people make some changes in their life. And she's this tiny, sweet lady. She comes into your home, greets you with a smile and a hug, and then learns a bit about you, about your life, about your family, some of the challenges you face dealing with stuff. And then she takes you out into the main room and she has you sit down, says, "Close your eyes. I want you just to think about, say thank you for the blessing of this space, what it has meant to you, what it can mean in the future." And she gets on her hands and knees and sort of blesses the house before she begins her work. When she's done, she kind of not slaps her hands, but essentially when she's done, it's ready to begin. She usually asks the people, "How's that feel? How's that feel?" just to say thank you. And often what you see is people tear up. Many of them talk about how overwhelmed they are, but how anxious they are for what could happen in the time with her. But Maria, this tiny, sweet lady, has a fierce side to her. She's a complete taskmaster who has a laser focus. And what she says is, we're going to deal with this stuff one category at a time through the whole house. But we're going to deal first with clothing. She makes them go to every closet, every storage bin, every cupboard, and essentially pull out every last piece of clothing. Underwear, socks, shoes, coats, shirts, you name it. Everything under the sun, put it on the bed. And people are just confronted with this mountain of stuff. They see it, and most of them are utterly shocked by it, and most of them are kind of embarrassed by it, and they voice that. And Maria says to them, "Your task is simple. Choose what you want to keep. If it brings you joy, and that's what you take into the future. But if you're lukewarm about it, or if it's a thing of the past, put it over here. Put it over here, and give it away. Give it away." It's a great image for us to, and as you give things away, she says, thank every last piece. Hold it in your hand and say thank you. It's a great image for us to consider, though. How much in this life do we keep for ourselves, and how much do we let go so that others might benefit? And I think what Maria points to is what Jesus would point to, is that there's joy and freedom in that giving away. Our life is about being a good steward of all that God has given us, our time, our talent, and our resources. And letting go matters. Letting go is a significant act. It's an act of faith. But I think what Jesus points us to is that in letting go, true life is actually found. A great story today. The man approaches Jesus, asking him to be an umpire in a family dispute. We probably have asked Jesus to enter into a family dispute before. But Jesus refuses in this case to participate because he knows greed is involved, and he's not willing to be an umpire in a greedy situation. Rather, what he does is just tells a story and lets people listen in. Tells the story about a farmer who has an incredible harvest one year. The farmer is incredibly ecstatic about this. He has essentially, to put it in perspective, it's like he has won the lottery, or he has invested, bought a stock for $5 and it's soared to the moon. He has won the jackpot, and that what you got to see is not the problem. Success and productivity are not the problem. The problem begins when the farmer starts obsessing over what to do with it. The Greek text makes it clear. He's just continually thinking about, what do I do with all this stuff? What do I do? What do I do with this jackpot? And he hatches a plan finally. And I just want to reread it real quickly for you and just kind of listen and pay attention to how many times you hear the word I and how many times you hear the word my. Verse 17, and he thought to himself, what should I do? For I have no place to store my crops. And then he said, I will do this. I will pull down my barns and I will build larger ones. And there I will store all my grain and my goods. And I will say to my soul, soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, and be merry. Plan is all about self. Self-centered is what you hear in that. It's all about the farmer, nobody else. He never gives one thought about giving. Going into the future, he just wants to keep everything in one pile for himself. Someone holds up a mirror to you. That's what's happening in the story. Jesus holds up a mirror in this family dispute and says, look at it. Holds it up for the farmer. And then he says, that's kind of a foolish, senseless way to live. He, keeping it all, realize in that story, does not prolong that man's life. In fact, he dies that very night. Doesn't take anything into the future. In a sense, his possessions have robbed him of life. It robbed him of joy. Robbed him of being part of the kingdom. Robbed him of being able to help his neighbor, be a peacemaker. Robbed him of the chance to bring healing into his community. But Jesus says it doesn't have to be that way. What Jesus says is none of us has to ever live the way of that farmer. One of the most important mentors in my life is Pastor E. Edward Kaiser, who was co-pastor with my father-in-law in Gaithersburg for 35 years. Was my wife's pastor growing up. And I had the privilege of working with him for 4 years while I was in seminary. And Ed's the type of person who just naturally takes you under the wing. And whether he realized it or not, he set an example for me that I'll never ever be able to repay him for. He's just such a great leader. He's kind and caring, incredibly hardworking. I mean, everything he did was to bless the ministry of St. James in that community, to further the mission. Ed was fun to be around. I tell you, I really look forward to every encounter with him. I knew being around him, I would feel built up and encouraged. And he was also one of the most generous people I have ever known. Bar none. He was so generous. He had this consistent posture that he was always ready to give. He was always willing to take from his pile of God-given resources and put it into action to bless other people. He cooked breakfast twice a week for the middle school and high school kids of the church. Would get up at 5 a.m. to go to church and cook for them. And 60 people is a lot of food, but Ed always just paid for it out of his own pocket. Whenever I have golfed with him for 30 years, he always refuses to allow me to pay. The kids in church sometimes have fundraisers for school or whatever, Ed just could not resist. He would buy from every kid, and so his office was just like loaded with candy bar, more candy than you could ever imagine. He was known to help people off the street. You'd be in his office, and people would be calling, and you hear him say, "How much do you need? How can I help?" And every single week in church, he would make sure to put his check in the offering plate to make it known that he was there to further the work of the church. I watched him, I learned from him, and what I also learned loud and clear is possessions really had no power over him. No power over him. He just experienced the joy of putting the God-given resources into action and blessing other people. And I said to myself along the way, I want to be like Ed. I want to follow that kind of example in wherever I go in ministry. And I think I'm still learning, but that's who I've tried to be like. One of the great privileges of my life is serving here at Good Shepherd. I remember when Bishop Schneider's office called me in middle of December 2000. They said there's this flagship congregation in Metro D.C. that's interested in talking to you. Caught my ear right away. And what interested me is I know flagship congregations are very, very generous. They're excited about mission and ministry. And I was willing to talk. And one of the things I've experienced in 19 years or so, 18 years serving here, but all the time I have known you, you're a congregation that has never let me down. We're loaded with great mentors right in our midst who take their God-given resources and don't keep it in one pile, but are willing to put it into action. The people here are dedicated to serving the poor, feeding the hungry, blessing local agencies that work on the front line with people in need. You do your best to help children. You build up the larger church. You raise up leaders who become pastors and rostered leaders in the church. You're excited about building and renovating for those who follow you. You support ministries like AA. The list goes on and on. And we're able to do those things because we have a lot of people in our midst who simply say these God-given things we've been given. How cool is it when we put those into action? You do that time and time again, and we're so grateful for that. There's joy in generosity. There's life in generosity. There's life and hope in giving, letting go, and putting it into action to bless others. Churches have a bright future when they dedicate themselves to that. And what I see is a bright future in this place. Amen.